asked for $370 million in damages. What did the judge rule?
So far, David, our team's quickly done some math. It appears the former president is on the hook for $354 million, obviously below what Letitia James was seeking after these months of proceedings that happened in downtown Manhattan, but nevertheless, a significant amount of money. David, as our team is pouring through this ruling from the judge, it also appears that Donald Trump's two eldest sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, who were running the company while their father was in the White House, both boys, David, on the hook for $4 million apiece. Now, the other part of this ruling from the judge, 92 pages that our team is pouring over at the moment, it says that Donald Trump cannot do any business related to real estate in New York for 3 years, and each of the boys, each 2 years apart, can also not do business in New York. David, in talking to sources around Donald Trump for the last couple of days, there was a little bit of optimism among the Trump family that maybe the boys would not be built into this ruling with Dad because of some of the comments that the judge had made over the weeks-long proceedings, that maybe the boys would be held out of it. That could be a way to keep the company going, if you will, just basically take everything that was under Donald Trump and slide it to his children. But this ruling, David, makes that impossible. It means that Donald Trump and the boys cannot do business in New York. And I can tell you, David, that one of the things that was being considered amongst Trump Tower is if that was to happen, what would happen to all of the employees of the Trump organization? That has been a big concern, David.
So let's just bring the audience back up to speed here. John, stick with us here because, again, the judge here in New York City in the civil fraud trial against Donald Trump has now handed down the ruling, the damages here. And as you heard John just report, our investigative team pouring through the decision from the judge. Initial read of this shows that the former president, Donald Trump, has been fined $354 million for civil fraud. Letitia James, the Attorney General in New York State, had asked for $370 million. The judge coming very close to that, $354 million. As John just reported there, it would appear at this point that each of the eldest sons, Don Jr. And Eric Trump, have both been fined $4 million each. So do the math there. That's 354 plus 8 million gets you up to 362 million or so in damages against both Donald Trump and his two sons. And as John points out, all three of them, according to initial reads of the ruling here, have been prohibited from doing business in New York State for several years to come. That's your read as well, Aaron Katersky?
David, this is not ruinous for former President Trump, but it is incredibly punishing because he, his children, executives at his company have been held liable for a decade's worth of business fraud. And the judge, in addition to enjoining them to prevent them from doing business in New York for a few years, has also taken aim at all of Trump's defenses, writing that total repayment of loans does not extinguish the harm that false statements inflict on the marketplace. Trump had said, no harm, no foul. I paid back the loans. The valuation of real estate is more art than science. But the judge writes that New York means business in combating business fraud, and indeed the common excuse that, well, everybody does it. The judge says is all the more reason to strive for honesty and transparency and to be vigilant in enforcing the rules.
All right, stick with us here. I want to put this up on the screen, this graphic. The control room can help me out with this. An example of one of the properties, Mar-a-Lago, which everyone knows. Not only were these New York properties, and many of them are established properties, people would know them in New York City and even beyond. But look at Mar-a-Lago. They had claimed that Donald Trump said Mar-a-Lago was worth $600 million. The appraisal in Palm Beach for that same property, the assessed value, was just $27 million. So again, saying anywhere up to $600 million was the value, when in actuality it was $27 million. And this is what the Attorney General was getting at, Aaron, is that that kind of exaggeration, even if the argument is, who did it hurt? Well, the Attorney General said it hurt the marketplace, other businesses in the marketplace. And if the average Joe or Jane out there in America can't inflate the value of their home or their business, then Donald Trump and his sons shouldn't be able to either. That was the argument.
That was exactly the argument. You and I can't lie about our finances to get a mortgage, so Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed to do it either. And there were repeated examples, not just Mar-a-Lago. There was his Fifth Avenue penthouse apartment in Trump Tower. on his financial statements, former President Trump tripled its size and therefore its value, said it was 30,000 square feet. It was about 10,000 square feet. His Seven Springs estate in suburban Westchester County, north of New York City. The Trumps said it was $261 million. The assessed value is below $30 million. And these exaggerations, the judge said, are not mere mistakes. It's not just differences of opinion. It's outright fraud.
When you talk about how many years they've been prevented from doing business in New York, I'll bring this back to John Santucci. It wasn't for the rest of their time. Actually, as businessmen, when you look at these, the age of the sons, obviously, when they're told a couple of years each prevented from doing business. But Donald Trump, and there's been a lot of focus on the age of the candidates in the race for president, both President Biden and former President Trump. When you're talking about Donald Trump, whether he wins or not, if he doesn't win, being prevented from a number of years from doing business, that would be a substantial punishment as well, just simply given his age.
Yeah, obviously, David, and obviously, you know, the Trump Organization, what it looked like in 2015 is very different than what it looks like now in 2024. I mean, Donald Trump talks about the golden escalator ride he took when he lived in Manhattan. Donald Trump is no longer a resident of Manhattan, moved his, obviously, his life down to Florida. All of his children now reside in the state of Florida. They all at one point lived in New York. David, I can tell you, just as you were coming to me, I was hanging up the phone with Eric Trump, one of the president's sons, obviously, who was a part of this ruling by the judge here in New York. David, Eric Trump telling me that the ruling, in his opinion, is a total joke, called it insane, said it feels like, David, they're living in an alternate universe. And David, one of the things that Eric Trump pointed out to me just now on the phone is that, you know, as he testified under oath, he remains and continues to stand by his testimony that he does not recall, you know, ever believing any of the information he was signing off on was fake, was altered, was any type of scheme. So obviously, as we expected, and Eric Trump just confirmed to ABC News, the Trump family, David, is already saying they will appeal this decision by the judge, and obviously we'll have to see how quickly they move on that.
And what's their defense? I'm sure you didn't have time to get into it on the phone, but when you talk to the sons, for example, this argument from Letitia James that they were operating in some sort of alternate universe, that's the allegation here, that they were inflating assets in a way that the average American just isn't allowed to do.
Yeah, and David, their argument is that they maintain that they ran a clean business. They point to, you know, different sales and transactions they've had that have been a success. One of the things that Donald Trump and both his children have pointed out to me over the years is the recent sale he had of the old post office, David. The former president making over $400 million on that sale after he had refurbished the old post office and eventually sold it to Hilton. So that's one example they point to, David. These were properties that were sought out by others when they did sales. They also recently point to a golf course here in New York that they sold for New York residents, the one where you drive over the Whitestone Bridge. They recently sold it to one of the casino giants for, I'm told, just under $100 million, David. So that's the success that they point to. These were properties and assets people wanted, so thus, in their mind, the evaluations that they attached to them were legitimate.
One quick question, John, for you before we move on to the rest of the team here and then get it back to our stations across the country. When you're talking about $354 million in fines for just the former president alone, put this in perspective. How much money have they spent, has the former president spent on legal bills already, the number of cases that he now faces while he's running for president? And how much of this money is actually coming from people donating to the campaign, actually footing the bill for these legal bills?
David, a lot of it. I mean, if you look at calendar year 2023, when you, Aaron, I, all of us were on the air going through the series of indictments, Donald Trump was expanding how many lawyers were on his payroll. And we know, David, because of those campaign finance reports that just came out over the last couple of weeks that we reported on the show with you a few weeks ago, that Donald Trump and his team have spent over $50 million on legal fees, on attorneys. Some of the attorneys, David, that worked on this case, the New York Attorney General's case, made millions of dollars directly because of their work for Donald Trump. And you have to recognize, David, look at just the last few weeks of coverage we've been reporting here on ABC. Donald Trump's legal troubles, we know the courts at the moment, right? Manhattan, Georgia, the 2 federal probes. But look at just a couple weeks ago. Donald Trump's team was in New York, it was in the Supreme Court, rather, focused on the 14th Amendment appeal. New lawyers were brought on for that. Special attorneys that were barred to appear before the Supreme Court. You got to know, David, they too were dipping into the campaign cash.
Not only that, but the E. Jean Carroll case in recent weeks and the amount of money fined in that case as well. A lot of people are going to start adding up these kinds of numbers and simply ask, where is this money going to come from?
Yep. Absolutely, David. And I think that's the thing. Look at where it has happened every time Donald Trump was indicted as a key example, right? We did it together 4 times, David, on the air. Donald Trump was indicted. They came out with a statement. Shortly thereafter, an email blast came out to supporters, fundraising, trying to pull in funds. Donald Trump's team bragged about the millions of dollars they raised after each indictment. And David, that money that was raised, all 50 million of it, went to pay those bills.
John Santucci with us, John Karl, our chief Washington correspondent, also with us. And John, there was a lot of focus just on this particular case alone and Donald Trump's behavior in that courtroom, admonished by the judge, fined by the judge along the way, and it figured into this decision.
It sure did. And David, before I get to what the judge said about it, just think about it. He spent upwards of 10 days in that courtroom. He testified. He would come out and give his daily press conferences. He was using the courtroom as a way to be part of his campaign. But look what the judge said about Trump's testimony in this case. Overall, Donald Trump rarely responded to the questions asked, and he frequently interjected long, irrelevant speeches on issues far beyond the scope of the trial. His refusal to answer the questions directly, or in some cases at all, severely compromised his credibility. So Donald Trump's time inside that courtroom, in the midst of a presidential campaign, using it as a way to boost his political prospects, it appears hurt his legal prospects. Again, the judge saying that his testimony, very strong language here, severely compromised his credibility. And one of the things that Trump talked about constantly in those press conferences, it seemed to be fixated on, was the value of Mar-a-Lago, because he was accused of overstating the value of Mar-a-Lago and insisted that it was worth well over $1 billion. This ruling takes some time to explain why that is simply not true. The judge explains that although Trump said Mar-a-Lago was worth between $1 billion and $1.5 billion today, he said that the judge says that would require valuing it as a private residence, which the deed prohibits, and it would have to make it the most expensive private residence listed in the county, Palm Beach County, by approximately 400%. And the judge explains, and this is important with the Mar-a-Lago property. Again, I mention this because this is something Trump has been fixated about, talked about not only in his appearances outside that courtroom, but talks about it in his campaign rallies. Trump signed 2 agreements with the government regarding Mar-a-Lago to limit his tax exposure. One was a 1995, a deed of conservation and preservation, where he gave up the right to use Mar-a-Lago, he or any other owner, for any purposes other than a social club. And a secondary deed, another deed in 2002, where he gave away in perpetuity the right to develop or use the property as a single-family residence. So that enabled Trump to significantly lower the taxes he would pay at Mar-a-Lago, but it means you can't subdivide it and put a bunch of homes, private residence on there, which is what you would need to see the value being as high as it is. But look, bottom line, Trump has used this case and the other cases on and on and on for his campaign. But in the courtroom, the judge sticks to the rule of law, sticks to the ruling, and is saying that that Trump has actually hurt his own credibility with his own statements.
John, let's just talk bigger picture here politically, because we've seen the polling that Americans, when they're polled, who they choose, and obviously we're still far out from Election Day in the race for president, but when they talk about a conviction on some of these criminal counts, and again, this is not one of those cases. We are still awaiting the Jack Smith trial, the trial in Georgia, the hush money case here in New York. We see how the polling suddenly shifts when people are asked, would you vote for a convicted felon? Now, in this case, this deals with another part and a huge part of Donald Trump's image, which is what he's really worth, what his businesses are worth, what he's worth as someone who prides himself in decades of doing business here in New York and beyond. When you see him called out, if you will, by this judge for grossly exaggerating the value of his properties and now being held accountable. And again, the numbers here at this hour, Donald Trump has now been fined $354 million in this case. Both sons fined $4 million each, which takes you to about $362 million. Donald Trump and his two sons have been fined for exaggerating the value of their real estate. Does this poke holes in that image for those who support Donald Trump? Obviously too soon to know, but again, this is a big part of the image that he presents on the campaign trail.
Well, Trump's entire political life is an outgrowth of his contention that he is the greatest, most successful business genius, that he is fabulously wealthy because he is fabulously successful in business and would bring the same acumen, business acumen to the government. But what you're seeing here with this incredible judgment, again, accusing him, first of all, of exaggerating his wealth, but also getting to the point where there's a real question whether or not he could even pay these fines on top of the fines that he is forced to pay in the E. Jean Carroll cases, not to mention all of the legal bills which John just went through and that he is using his political fundraising to help pay for. I mean, Donald Trump's image as a incredibly successful, wealthy businessman is also very much what was on trial here and very much in question right now. Can he pay this? Now, I have to say, the other thing that strikes me here, David, is that this decision, coming so closely on the heels of the E. Jean Carroll decision, and before we get into the criminal cases, but this decision comes just as Donald Trump has solidified his almost total control over the Republican Party. He is come out and he's pushed for a replacement at the RNC. Ronna McDaniel is going to be leaving. Trump's choice to run the RNC is all but certain, likely to take over. He has said that he wants his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, to be the co-chairman of the RNC, and has said that the purpose of the Republican Party, its entire purpose, everything that it must do, must be focused on one thing, and that is electing Donald Trump the President of the United States. Now, one question that this raises is, Donald Trump, while he was president, used the RNC to pay his legal bills. Once he became a candidate for president and wasn't the only Republican candidate, that ended because the RNC technically can't take sides in a Republican primary. But what's going to happen now? Is the Republican National Committee going to be yet another engine, an engine he may really need to help keep on top of these finances, faced with these massive fines and massive legal bills all at the same time.
You speak of this pause from the RNC during this primary process, but in the meantime, as John Santucci pointed out, John, by and large, Donald Trump supporters in the country are paying many of these legal bills for him.
I mean, it's small donors. It's it's donations that come in, often less than $100. Working class people who have taken to fully believe his argument, his contention that he is a victim of a witch hunt, that everybody is out to get him, and he says they're out to get me because their real target is you, and I'm the one standing in the way. And it's that they have raised tens of millions of dollars, and as John went through, much of that money has gone to pay Donald Trump's legal bills. But by the way, the RNC's money also comes, it comes in some cases from wealthy donors, but also, comes from small-time donors, the people that you see that go to those Trump rallies and have been going for years. In many ways, those people that show up and to cheer him on at his rallies are the ones that are tapped to pay his legal bills. But now, I mean, the legal bills, as huge and massive and accumulating as they are, that's just the least of it. Now you have, this judgment, which they're going to appeal, just like they're going to appeal the latest in the Eugene Carroll case. But this is the kind of money that could face somebody in a position like Donald Trump's to have to liquidate all of their assets to pay. Donald Trump says he is a multi-billionaire. Well, he's going to need to be to pay what he's being fined here.
Yeah, these are extraordinary numbers. The Eugene Carroll case and now this case here in New York, the civil fraud trial. John Karl, our thanks to you. Again, the breaking news at this hour, the judge in this case, Judge Engoron, fining Donald Trump $354 million, just more than $354 million in the civil fraud trial. Each of his sons, Don Jr., Eric, each ordered to pay $4 million for exaggerating the wealth of their business holdings in order to get better loans, to get better insurance policies, the kind of thing that the Attorney General had argued everyday Americans cannot do, and if they do, get in trouble every day for this, and that Donald Trump should not be above the law, was her argument all along. I want to bring in Asha Rangappa, our legal contributor, former special agent, New York Division of the FBI, of course, with Yale. And Asha, I just wanted to ask you, because you heard John Karl mention there, it's obvious this will be appealed. One of the questions that comes to mind, how do you pay for the appeal? Obviously, with all of these other mounting fines that are just sort of extraordinary in just the terms of what kind of money we're talking about here, and how successful would or couldn't appeal in a case like this be?
Yeah, so he's likely to appeal. Now, he would probably have to post a surety bond in order to appeal, which means that they would take a portion of the judgment, maybe 10%, that he has to essentially put up as collateral while the appeal goes on. And if he loses, then that gets automatically forfeited. So in this case, I mean, if you look at, say, 10% of what he owes, $35 million, does he have that to put up? So that's the first hurdle. The second is what would actually be appealed. This was a bench trial, which means that the judge was deciding both questions of fact and questions of law, where normally you might have a jury decide the questions of fact. On appeal, the judge's determinations on those questions of fact are going to be given a lot of deference. So, for example, what his determinations were on the credibility of the witnesses, the fact that he felt, as he said in the order, that he did not believe that Trump or any of the other defendants expressed any remorse. And he believed that that evinced intent to continue to engage in this if he didn't institute any kind of remedy. And then on the legal issue, this was a court of equity, which means that what he was looking at was how to make this fair again, that Trump had been cheating, and how do we compensate New York for this unfairness? So he was disgorging profits, where he was saying all of these ill-gotten gains we need to remove from Trump and give it back to New York. So this is all based on calculations of, interest he got away with not paying, or things that he was able to buy by securing loans or providing false statements. And so, it would be, I think, unlikely on appeal for that kind of precise calculation to be in error. The one thing that could have maybe he prevailed on is that the judge initially had canceled all of Trump's business certificates. This is known as the corporate death penalty. It's a very draconian measure. Letitia James had tried this with the NRA, and the judge did not allow it. But this order actually modifies that earlier penalty, and he says, I'm not going to cancel all the business certificates en masse. We're going to do it on an ad hoc basis as needed by this compliance monitor that's been appointed by the court. So I think this will be pretty steady on appeal, but Trump may try to appeal it.
Asha Rangappa, court of equity, as she points out, trying to square things, if you will, after years of the judge saying that Donald Trump, his business, his family members who were in business with him, grossly exaggerated the values of what they owned here in New York and beyond in order to secure better deals, better loans, access to loans that perhaps everyday Americans would not get access to unless they, exaggerated their wealth and their value as well. Asha, thank you for that. And in fact, Aaron, you and I were talking off camera here about something the judge actually wrote in here about that, fully aware that the argument on the campaign trail is this is an attack, this is a witch hunt, this is political in nature, but the judge lays out why he came up with the numbers that he came up with.
He does, and sometimes he uses colorful language, but he's frank. He said, look, Donald Trump is not Bernie Madoff, the famous, infamous Ponzi schemer. The defendant did not commit murder or arson, but he says Trump's complete lack of contrition and remorse borders on pathological, and crucially, Justice Engoron said this court finds that defendants are likely to continue their fraudulent ways unless the court grants significant injunctive relief. And so he's saying Trump's going to be a recidivist, fraudster, unless the penalty is so severe, $354 million, and a ban from business in New York for the next 3 years is pretty severe. Unless he imposed something that severe, the judge became convinced that Trump would continue to commit fraud and continue to exaggerate his wealth.
But as Asha points out, the judge did not give Letitia James everything that she'd asked for.
She did not, and not quite the amount of money that Letitia James may have been hoping for.
But close.
But it's very, very close.
But on the business certificates,
he did not end up canceling the business certificates as the judge initially had done. And even then, the Attorney General didn't ask him to do that. He sort of freelanced that on his own in a partial summary judgment motion. He takes that back here and instead imposes a monitor over the Trump Organization. So former President Trump's business now has a semi-permanent babysitter, and Trump himself cannot be involved in any of these transactions for the next 3 years.
and as we know, he's in his late 70s, which is, as we know, young and plenty of time to do many things. But in the world of business, to be held off from doing any kind of business here in New York for 3 years, you would think is significant to someone who's made a career and certainly built their career here in New York.
And his kids can't do business for the next 2 years. So the Trump Organization is in flux. And we had thought initially, had the judge gone forward and canceled the business certificates, what would have happened to the Trump name on all the buildings around here? Seems like the name can stay, but the status of the company and who's going to lead it for the next couple of years, that's what's very much in question. And $354 million, David, may well eat up the remaining cash that he has on hand.
And obviously they can put that on hold while they appeal, but they'll have to put up something.
They're going to either have to put up the bond, as Asha says, and there is some interest that could increase the penalty effectively,
right,
or you effectively have to put it all in escrow with the court. And I don't know.
So either way, it ties up the money.
Who's got $354 million lying around?
Certainly no one's here on this desk. Aaron, thank you. I want to bring in Rachel Scott, who covers Capitol Hill and the race for president for us. And Rachel, as John Santucci had pointed out earlier, after the headlines, and we've only had one that's as eye-popping as this, and that was the damages after E. Jean Carroll. Now we have $354 million in fines in this case alone for Donald Trump, the civil fraud trial, and the email, the fundraising appeal has gone out.
Just went out just minutes ago, David. So now Donald Trump facing this massive fine. His campaign, the Super PAC, already blasting out an email to his supporters asking for 1 million of them to start to chip in. As we have noted, this is money that the former president is using to pay for his legal fees. $50 million of it went toward that in 2023. In the short term, we have not really seen this impact the former president when it comes to Republican primary politically. He dominated in Iowa. He dominated in New Hampshire. He's ahead in South Carolina. But when you look at the long term and all that the former president is now facing, 91 criminal charges, multiple trials possibly here ongoing throughout the course of this election, when polls asked voters whether or not they would support the former president if he is convicted, this is where you see Donald Trump start to lose his edge in a head-to-head matchup with President Biden. The biggest shift is among independents. He drops about 11 points. And this is all the more reason why you have rivals like Nikki Haley staying in this race. She says that Americans would not vote for a convicted felon. That's Donald Trump.
Rachel Scott with us here, and of course, those are the trials still yet to come, though today's decision will certainly loom large for Donald Trump himself and his family and the Trump organization, and whether or not Donald Trump supporters in the country will be swayed by this kind of number and the argument that the judge has made in his decision, which is $354 million isn't an attack, and the judge in his decision lays out why he came up with that number, essentially saying, as Aaron Katersky said a moment ago, making the case that if it weren't a number like this, that this kind of business behavior would in fact continue. Again, Donald Trump fined $354 million. Each of his two eldest sons, Don Jr. and Eric Trump, both fined $4 million each, and all three of them prevented from doing business in New York for the next several years. John Santucci, do we have a reaction from the Trump organization, from Donald Trump?
David, we have so much reaction. I'm just going to flag an email that literally we all just received from our colleague Avery Harper. Donald Trump, David, already fundraising off of this decision, playing into that conversation that you, me, Rachel Scott, and everyone were just having. The reaction is remarkable coming in right now. The Trump organization claiming that, this is a miscarriage of justice, that they, of course, plan to appeal. Similar statements from Donald Trump's attorneys, David. And the Trump organization statement, I believe, written by the two sons, echoing that conversation I had with Eric Trump, that they believe that this was an effort by the Attorney General to go after them personally. They believe that this was a miscarriage of justice, and they maintain, David, they have run a clean business, never missed a payment for any of the loans that they have out with Deutsche Bank and others that were mentioned throughout the proceedings that we saw go on for several weeks and months in downtown. And David, you got to imagine for right now, the question they're trying to figure out is, with that independent arbiter coming in, what happens in the immediate future? But the one thing we do know, and Aaron mentioned this with you a couple seconds ago, the Trump name that is emblazoned on buildings all around New York City for now remains, David.
You heard those arguments, John Santucci, thank you, from the Trump sons, from the Trump family. The judge says that's simply not the case. The evidence proved otherwise, and again, they were found liable previously. This trial was about the damages and what kind of punishment they would face. Today, we learned it this afternoon, that the judge in this civil fraud trial, again, fining Donald Trump, the former president, $354 million, and each of his sons $4 million each, which takes you to about $363 million. The Attorney General, Letitia James, had asked for $370 million. She did not get that number, though the judge came very close. And again, both Donald Trump and his two sons prevented from doing business here in New York for the next couple of years. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live, abcnews.com. For those of you here in the East, many of you have local news starting at 4 o'clock Eastern, and I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight a little later today. I'm David Muir in New York. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Works. Brick and I are the only ones that have to know what's going on. We bring Jocelyn into this. She's going to drive my enemies to you.
We know how to be careful.
Okay, I know Jocelyn loves you. She loves her family too. But we involve Jocelyn. It's all for nothing.
Then shoot me! It's not worth it. Okay? Joss made my life worth living. Without her, you might as well finish me off now.
I would absolutely help if I could.
Sons, $4 million each, which takes you to about $363 million. The Attorney General, Letitia James, had asked for $370 million. She did not get that number, though the judge came very close. And again, both Donald Trump and his two sons prevented from doing business here in New York for the next couple of years. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live, abcnews.com. For those of you here in the East, many of you have local news starting at 4 o'clock Eastern, and I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight a little later today. I'm David Muir in New York. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Works.
And David, thank you so much. I'm Kira Phillips. Hello, everyone. We are going to continue our coverage now of the breaking news. Donald Trump found guilty of fraud, now having to pay $354 million after the judge makes his decision in the former president's civil lawsuit. This will no doubt impact his personal fortune, as the judge also has banned Trump from doing any real estate business in New York for 3 years. Trump's sons Eric and Don Jr. also found guilty for fraud. They, too, fined for millions of dollars. This all began, you'll remember, when New York Attorney General Letitia James accused Trump and his kids of engaging in a decade-long scheme in which they used numerous acts of fraud and misrepresentation to inflate Trump's net worth in order to get more favorable loan terms and just inflate his wealth, period. Let's bring in our contributor and trial attorney, Brian Buckmeyer. Also, an entire panel, of course, will be weighing in on this as we continue to get more information. And just, I mean, Brian, just trying to go through the documents here, you know, listening to David Muir as he started us off here with the breaking news coverage. Now we're picking up to dive in a little deeper. I have many questions, many notes, but let me just start with your first reaction. I don't think anybody is really surprised that he's being held accountable here. If you just look at how the other cases have been going so far against Trump, I think everybody pretty much knew he was going to have to pay something and that his business empire would be impacted. His ability to operate in real estate in New York would be impacted. Indeed, it has been. But I think one of the most stunning parts of this is the judge, and we'll talk about the decisions that he made here, but he also put in print and was very direct about Trump's character, going after his character and actually calling him pathological. So your first reaction to everything overall, and then we'll dive in a little deeper here.
Yeah, Kira, first reaction in terms of the dollar amount, as you said, not surprised, just shy of what Letitia James, the Attorney General, was asking for. So it's within the ballpark that we had contemplated. But as you pointed out, the language that the judge went into in describing Donald Trump, maybe not as surprising. He definitely bit his tongue and held his words during the trial. But Donald Trump let the world know what he thought of the judge, his clerk, the process. And oftentimes when a judge has the ability to set down a ruling, that's when their real thoughts about the defendant, especially if they're found guilty or in this case liable, comes out. I did not think the judge would go this far in terms of calling him pathological, as we are talking or saying borders on pathological in terms of his remorse. But he did not hold back in terms of his candor and the way that Donald Trump conducted himself in this case.
Gotcha. All right, Brian, sorry, we were having a little bit of an audio issue there. Stay with me if you don't mind. I'd like to bring in our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky, who's been following this from the very beginning. Aaron, I don't know if you had a chance to hear what Brian had to say, but I'll just let you add to the decision here on behalf of the judge and your thoughts as well on how the judge even slammed Trump's character throughout all of this.
Saying that the way Trump portrayed himself during trial when he testified and at times out in the hallway amounted to the pathological. He dismantled Trump's character in a way, but he also acknowledged that Trump is not a murderer. He didn't commit arson. He's no Bernie Madoff, the infamous Ponzi schemer. But instead, he said that unless the penalty that he imposed was so severe, he believed, the judge did, that Trump would keep on committing the kind of fraud that he had previously held him liable for, exaggerating his wealth, overvaluing his properties to try and get better terms on loans and insurance. And so a $354 million penalty may not be ruinous for someone of the means of Donald Trump, but it is highly punishable. It may, in fact, eat up all of his available cash, and he is going to have to, in all likelihood, put up at least a portion of it, set it aside, even as he appeals, and he is not going to be allowed to do business in New York for the next 3 years. His sons are not going to be allowed to do business here for the next 2 years, so it does leave control of the family real estate business up in the air.
Speaking of control, John Karl, this is all happening at a time where the former president right now, as he runs for the White House once again, is basically in control of the GOP.
I mean, it's extraordinary. Just over the past couple of weeks, it seems like a complete takeover of the Republican Party, both on Capitol Hill, where we saw Donald Trump almost single-handedly tank a major immigration bill that had been worked out with Senate conservatives, including the Senate leader, Mitch McConnell. Donald Trump came out against it. It went down. McConnell had to actually end up voting against it himself. He seems to have control over the agenda in the House under Speaker Johnson, and he has effectively ousted the leader of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. She's going to be leaving after the South Carolina primary, and Donald Trump's hand-chosen successor is likely to take over. He also wants his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, to be the co-chairman of the Republican National Party. That is likely to happen. Laura Trump has said in interviews that she will make it so that the Republican Party, the Republican National Committee, is focused on one thing above all others, and that is electing Donald Trump president, that every dollar that organization spend will be to assure that Donald Trump is elected president. And of course, he's running away with the Republican nomination, it would seem. The South Carolina primary coming up in less than 2 weeks, just over a week. Super Tuesday on March 5th. Politically, Donald Trump, it appears, has never been stronger, never been a stronger figure in the Republican Party. And yet, on the legal front, we have this massive judgment against him in this case, coming after the massive judgment against him in the second E. Jean Carroll case, a case where he was found liable for sexual assault. And we haven't even mentioned the criminal cases, the 4 different criminal cases, the first one now set to begin on March 25th. So yes, you have this incredible dichotomy of Donald Trump asserting virtual complete control over the Republican Party. I would argue in some ways stronger than he had while he was president of the United States, and very much on the ropes legally, and his business on the ropes. It's really an incredible scene, split screen scene here, Kira.
And you know, just to emphasize that point, you know, you're the one that has written numerous books about Trump, covered the Trump White House. I had a little bit of time doing that with you. Just taking into account everything you just said. And by the way, when you mentioned the 2 E. Jean Carroll cases and now the civil fraud trial, the former president on the hook for $443.1 million. You say he has never been stronger. He's already fundraising off of this. What does this tell you about just the state of politics right now? What does this say about our country? What does this say about where we're going in 2024?
Well, first, it tells you why Donald Trump has centered his entire campaign, and this is new. This is not Donald Trump in 2016. This is not Donald Trump in 2020. He has centered his campaign on this idea of retribution, of revenge, vengeance, portraying himself as a victim, saying that it is a massive witch hunt. It is the weaponization of our legal system out to get me. What Donald Trump has told his supporters is that the reason why that is happening is their real target is you. I stand in the way. Well, you see why he's done that, because certainly for Donald Trump, it has become clear this election is central for his own personal well-being. This election may literally be the difference between Trump becoming president or Trump going to prison. But he has made that case, and our country is so incredibly divided at this point. it has resonated. It has resonated. I wouldn't say that it's resonated with all Republicans, certainly. I think, you've seen as Nikki Haley makes this effort to stand up to him in the Republican primaries, there's been, a good chunk of the Republican electorate, a minority of the Republican electorate so far, that is looking for another path. But the majority at this point of Republican voters that we have seen have said, that's our guy, and we believe that he's a victim. We don't believe this stuff. We don't buy the 91 indictments, the reasons behind that, and we don't buy the what was said in the civil suit that E. Jean Carroll brought. And they're now, we'll see how they do with their fundraising appeal on this. I bet they do quite well, and it'll be quite ironic, because what Donald Trump has done masterfully throughout his time as a politician is raise money in small dollar amounts. It isn't. He's not getting. These aren't billionaires that are ponying up and sending him money. These are the kind of people that go out to his rallies. These are working class Americans who believe what he has said about the weaponization of our legal system and believe that Donald Trump is a victim. These are people, by and large, not of great means, who are struggling with issues that you would think would be animating the campaign, issues like the economy and inflation, who are writing checks of $20, $50, $75 and sending them to Donald Trump and to his various organizations.
And you just mentioned the fundraising, hot off the press. Here it is right here,
Yeah,
the first flyer. Trump, Make America Great Again 2024, end the witch hunt. Breaking from Trump, Democrat New York judge just ruled against me. First, they raided my home, arrested me, took my mugshot. Then they had me illegally removed from the ballot in 2 states. Now a Democrat judge ruled against me in New York. Undeniable election interference. Here we go. It's out and about. Let's take it straight to the Hill. Our senior, go ahead, John. I want to bring senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott in on this too. Maybe we can two-box you here, because I'd love to know, Rachel, what you're hearing from the Hill, how lawmakers are responding. John, stay with me if you can. Sure. John just mentioned, this hasn't resonated with all Republicans, but if you just look at what's coming out in the minutes after this decision was made, you sort of question those Republicans that are still fighting against this, how much air they still have in the room.
And look, John here is spot on. The Republican Party has been standing by the former president, from the RNC to just how many Republicans up on Capitol Hill who maybe even expressed reservations about the former president after January 6th now have come back around. They are standing by him, even as he is in and out of court, out on the campaign trail, using these his legal challenges as the centerpiece of his campaign. And so big picture here, as we look at this, in the short term, yes, you see the former president, he's fundraising off of this. I just got back from a rally in South Carolina. His supporters walk around with shirts with his mugshot on them. They cheer very loudly when he blasts the judges, when he blasts those who are going after him in these legal cases, saying they're coming after you as well. So in the short term, we haven't seen this make any huge impact on Trump's campaign. He is still the far and away front runner in the Republican primary. But when you look at the long term, and when you look at all that Trump is facing here, still he has these 91 criminal charges. John mentioned that upcoming trial on March 25th. This could hurt the former president the longer that we get closer and closer to November. You look at some of these polls here, and it shows that Trump actually loses the slight edge that he has on President Biden if he were to be convicted of a felony. It also shows that the biggest shift in those polls is among independent voters, with Trump dropping about 11 points among independents if he were to be convicted. But then yet again, we see sort of like this circular reasoning here. You even have Nikki Haley, who says that Americans are not going to vote for a convicted felon, but yet at the same time, she also says that she would support the Republican nominee, even if that's Trump, and even if he's convicted of a felony.
Stay tuned. Rachel, thank you so much. And John Santucci, I can't keep up with all the statements now coming from Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr. It looks like Chris Kise, also Trump's attorney, in addition to his spokesperson, Alina Habba. I don't even know where to begin. Take it,
Well, Kira,
take it from there. How about there?
Yeah, listen, Kira, that's why you got me, right? That's what I'm here for. So look, we've gotten a lot of reaction from Team Trump. So let's actually start with the campaign here, because that I think is the most interesting reaction. Immediately, a conversation we were having with you, John, others already, the Trump team is fundraising off of this ruling. And obviously, all of that fundraising, Kira, has gone to funnel Donald Trump's legal coffers for all of these cases that are currently happening across the country. Now, as far as reaction from Team Trump, the Trump Organization and both of Donald Trump's adult children are vowing to appeal this decision. The company saying in a statement that they never missed a loan payment, they run a clean business, and that they believe this was all politically motivated. Eric Trump telling me in a brief phone conversation, Kira, that this ruling is a total joke. He called it insane and said that this judge and the attorney general are living in an alternate universe. And Donald Trump Jr., his elder brother, echoing similar statements to ABC News, telling us, Kira, that, look, it depends on where you are in the country. If it's a political enemy of yours that's the prosecutor, in this case, they believe that's Letitia James, who is an elected Democrat. They believe that they were a losing case going into this, Kira, simply because of that fact.
Okay, Asharangappa, what do you think? I think we're going to see an appeal. I don't know. I'm putting it out there. I think that's what the next move is going to be.
Well, that would typically be the next move, and I think the question is really, can he appeal? He would likely be required to put up a surety bond, which means that he would have to find some percentage of what he owes to give to the court as collateral while his appeal goes forward. So say that is 10%. He has to come up with $35 million in order to just appeal the case, and then that would automatically be forfeited if he loses. So then he has to look at the merits of the appeal and how likely he is to succeed. And unlike his other cases, Kyra, this is a state law issue. This really gets to the heart of the interest that New York has. It's not something that's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And this was really based on fairness principles, looking at how Trump profited unjustly and trying to disgorge him of those profits. So I think he has to really look at, is he going to succeed on appeal? I will be interested to see whether he is able to, given what he might have to put up as collateral.
John Karl, you want to follow up on that?
Well, look, we'll see how the appeals go, but the bottom line is this is 2024 and Donald Trump. This is, Trump, as I had quoted him in the book I wrote, tired of winning. He's winning everywhere he can win among Republican voters, and he's losing everywhere he can lose in the courts. And this is the way this is going to go. And it's a race to November, and you can hear it in the tone of the responses and the fundraising appeals. There's this almost desperation of lashing out at the injustices of our legal system, the witch hunt. They're after me. And it's dominating his campaign message. This is the campaign message. It is the campaign message, and it will be the effort to appeal.
And John, just looking at the cases that are still before us, it's hard even to keep track of all of them. Looking at the money he now owes, $443.1 million. And I know I ask this a lot. I ask it to all of you usually once we cover a case like this and there is a decision, especially when it means the former president has to pay up and pay up in a big way. He's lost money before. He's filed for bankruptcy before. He just comes back. It seems like it's like Lazarus. You think he's about to lose everything and die out, and here he comes again, just stronger, as you said, than ever. Do you see really any of this impacting him business-wise, financially? I mean, really impacting him to where he's broke and not ever a player again?
Well, look, I mean, this is real money. As you know, Everett Dirksen said once, you know, $1 million here, $1 million there. Pretty soon you're talking real money. You know, $100 million here, $100 million there. I mean, this is real money. We'll see how the appeals process goes. You know, what he's going to be forced to do. Donald Trump has always, you know, portrayed himself as having more money than the evidence would present. I mean, he at one point, you know, had sued Forbes magazine for not putting him on their list of richest people in the world, and for undervaluing how much he was worth. But you know, this is a massive amount of money, even for the Donald Trump even for as rich as Donald Trump portrays himself to be. This is a massive amount of money, and it's on top of the crush of legal bills that he is facing. Now, he's been able to you know, pay for a lot of those legal bills with his political organizations and on the backs of the fundraising that he has done. He's about to recapture control over the Republican National Committee. Perhaps the RNC will also be tapped once again to help pay his legal bills. But this, you get the sense that, you know, the walls are moving in on him. But as I said, you and I have both been saying, they're moving in on him financially, legally, politically, at least among Republicans, and that's an important distinction. Among Republicans, you know, he's running as strong as he's ever run.
It's really quite remarkable and wild to watch, for sure. So, Aaron, let's just kind of bring it all together here. New York Attorney General Letitia James is set to speak, in about an hour or so. Tell us about that. What could we hear? Probably a victory speech, but anything that you know about her press conference she's set to hold.
There's no question this is going to be a victory speech. Letitia James has been with this case since she took office. It was back in September of 2022 when she first brought the case against Donald Trump. She has survived all those years of litigation and his efforts to either derail or delay it. And so, as she said on the steps of the courthouse, she was confident victory would be hers. And she's now proved to be right about that. In her tenure as Attorney General, Letitia James has rarely lost, and she prevails now over the Trump Organization, despite former President Trump's defenses that there was really never any harm, there was no victim, the banks got paid back, his loans were good, and the judge sided with Letitia James in saying it doesn't matter because this is all about preventing the next fraud. And I think that's how she will characterize her prevailing in court here tonight.
We will wait for those remarks live and, of course, take them in their entirety. Aaron, thank you so much. And thanks to all our correspondents and contributors who took part in this breaking news coverage on all our platforms throughout the day. GMA3 starts right after a quick break.
Says you can't go for bold without going broke. Get the brands you want, the prices you want, whenever you want. TJ Maxx, where you can always afford to be you to the max.
You give, and you give. This tax season, you get with Straight Talk Wireless. You get unlimited data. You get America's most reliable 5G network. You get a Samsung Galaxy A14 on them, and you are 2 doors down.
Oh no, I'm here for the free phone.
Yeah. Turn your tax refund into a U fund. Switch to Straight Talk for plans starting as low as $25 a line. Find us at straighttalk.com.
There's nothing better than a Subway Series footlong, except when you add an all-new footlong sidekick, like the $2 footlong churro covered in cinnamon sugar deliciousness, or the $3 footlong pretzel, salted and baked to perfection, honey mustard shot, and let's not forget the $5 gooey footlong chocolate chip cookie. What's your favorite, Clay?
You're my favorite sidekick. No, you're my favorite sidekick.
We'll get back to him later. Every epic footlong deserves a perfect sidekick.
Hey, CoverGirls. Plant Power? It's a game changer. Introducing the ultimate plant-powered mascara called Cleantopia. 300% extreme lush volume. Now in dramatic ultramarine black. Cleantopia Mascara, Ultramarine Black. From CoverGirl.
You must know what it's like. Baby, you must know what it's like to love somebody, the way I love you.
From America's #1 news source comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and it can customize to you and your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience what all the buzz is about. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now.
Reporting from the Federal Reserve, I'm ABC's Elizabeth Schulze. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
What you need to know right now on GMA3.
You're confused. You think I'm on trial. These people are on trial for trying to steal an election in 2020. I'm not on trial.